So what did you check out this month?
I watched Mighty Joe Young from 1949, a movie that I have seen a million times before. Ray Harryhausen's first movie, although he was not doing all of the effects by himself. This is a really good movie. It's basically all the people behind the original King Kong coming together again to make another movie about a giant gorilla, without dinosaurs this time, unfortunately. It's basically about this girl who adopts a gorilla, a baby gorilla, when she's a child, and grows up with it, and it, grows up into this giant gorilla. And then you have Robert Armstrong basically playing the same character from King Kong, essentially, coming to Africa looking for some kind of exhibit that he can take back with him for his exotic nightclub. And he finds Joe and convinces the girl and Joe to go with him to New York. And of course they end up being miserable there and dealing with shitty people the whole time. And I really I feel like this is something you don't really see in older movies, but how crappy normal people are is portrayed really well. Yeah, there's just little asides with characters that don't matter at all, but they feel very genuine. And King Kong had some of that too, but this movie has it a lot more, and it really adds to kind of the sense of realism in a way. I mean, it's not a super realistic movie or anything, but it makes it feel like a real world kind of thing. And it makes it feel like the people behind the movie really it makes it feel a lot smarter. Like they kind of understand what their audience is even. It almost feels like they might be making fun of their own audience sometimes. And it's really good. I really like this movie a lot.
And then go watch the Superior remake.
I actually don't remember the remake, so I don't want to say anything about it. I know Bill Paxton was in it, so it's probably really good.
Yeah, he was pretty good as the giant gorilla.
No, I did see it in theaters back when it came out, but I haven't seen it since then.
Who's the Naomi Watts? Right?
Charlize Theron. Naomi Watts was in the Peter Jackson King Kong.
That's right.
Yeah, my only real complaint about the movie is that Joe looks a little too cartoony sometimes, and the effects are definitely not as impressive as King Kong or, later Harryhausen movies, but it's just a good movie, so I would definitely say check it out. I watched a movie from 1958 called Run Silent, Run Deep. This was a World War II submarine movie. Clark Gable plays a submarine commander whose sub gets shot down by the Japanese. He's kind of taken out of duty for a while. They end up bringing him back in and putting him in command of a submarine that's going to basically the same area, and they are temporarily relieving BURT Lancaster of command and putting Clark Gable back in charge, which leads to some tension there. And given that the movie is directed by Robert Wise, he also directed Star Trek The Motion Picture, and I couldn't stop thinking about that because it's basically the same thing you have with Picard coming back to command the Enterprise, and whatever that other guy's name was being upset about it. And it made me wonder if this movie was part of why they chose him to direct that movie. This was a good movie. It was based on a book, and I read that the author of the book didn't like the movie because it really went far away from what the book was. I thought the movie was really good for the most part, especially given that the majority of it takes place on the submarine, and it keeps everything interesting the whole time. The only thing I really didn't like was, I guess there are two things. There are certain little background character moments that don't feel like they fit. They feel a little too old-fashioned. This movie was too good for kind of the dumb, typical things you got in old mainstream movies. There's just a certain style of acting and line delivery where it's like the kind of dumb jokes that are aiming for the mainstream where you already know what the joke is going to be before they even finish it. And there was a little bit of that in this movie, and it didn't fit because the rest of the movie was really good. The other thing I didn't like, though, was the ending. I honestly thought the ending was a little stupid. I'm obviously not going to say what happens, but I thought it was a little stupid. And once kind of the final conflict, I guess you could say, is resolved, the movie just ends. There is no kind of resolution to the characters or anything like that. It's just over. And I really did not like that. So I was enjoying it up until the last, probably less than 10 minutes that I didn't enjoy. So I don't know. I guess I would hesitantly recommend it if you're into World War II submarine movies.
The only reason I know this movie exists is because it's referenced in the 1966 Batman movie as an inside joke because Frank Gorshin was supposed to be in it, but on the way to the audition was in a car accident.
So how do they reference it?
In the Penguin submarine, Burgess Meredith tells the guy running the sub, "Run silent, run deep."
I watched a movie from 1996 called The Whole Wide World. This is a romance, I guess, which is not the kind of thing I usually watch, but It's about the relationship between Robert E. Howard, who is quite possibly my favorite writer, and a school teacher named Rosalind Price. I'd seen this movie before. It's really good. Robert E. Howard is best known for creating Conan the Barbarian, but he did a lot of other stuff too. And from that side of things, I kind of wish the movie went a little bit more into his writing, and it really makes him seem a little kind of unhinged, which I don't know how accurate that was to real life. I know there were kind of some weird aspects to him as a person, but it's a really good movie. Very well put together. Vincent D'Onofrio plays Robert E. Howard, and Renee Zellweger plays Rosalind Price, and they both do a really good job.
That sounds interesting.
So yeah, I would definitely recommend this movie, even to people who don't know anything about Robert E. Howard. It's just a really good movie, period. It's a very sad movie, too, for people who are into those kind of romance movies. I doubt we have much of an audience for that on our channel, but it's really good. Let's see. Oh, man, okay. I watched a movie from 1989 called Cyborg.
Yeah, Cyborg.
Starring Jean-Claude Van Damme and directed by Albert Pyun. I knew it was going to be good when I saw Albert Pyun's name. He is the director of the 90s Captain America movie, and I also know him from Doll Man, which are two pieces of shit, so I was not surprised when Cyborg turned out to be a huge piece of shit. Oh man, this movie, I don't know if I could even tell you what it's about because I'm not sure. I know there was a cyborg in it. I'm legitimately trying to remember. Van Damme plays a guy who escorts people across the country, and he's escorting a cyborg. I can't remember why. It takes place in the future, it's kind of like a Mad Max kind of future, and that's all I remember from the plot. I know there's a lot of flashbacks that probably don't matter. The movie was made because it was a Canon Films release, and they had been planning on doing a sequel to Masters of the Universe and a Spider-Man movie that for some reason Albert Pyun, I think he was going to direct both of those, which would have been ridiculous. But they both fell apart. And they said, well, we have some things that we've already put in place for that. Let's just make a movie using the sets that we've built and that kind of thing. And it turned out to be Cyborg, which, if I remember right, Albert Pyun wrote it in like a couple of days. It doesn't make a lot of sense, which is part of why I'm not sure what it's about. The worst things about it, though, are the way the whole movie is put together. Every single aspect of it feels really, really cheap, from the acting to the writing to freaking the cinematography, something that I've come to expect from Albert Pyun. He does these weird camera angles where sometimes he'll have the camera really low to the ground, pointing up at somebody, or he'll do these weird fisheye lenses in situations where it doesn't make sense. He has these shots where the camera will randomly kind of dolly into somebody who's just standing there, but it doesn't make sense. There's no reason for it to happen. Oh man, and the editing was the worst part of the whole thing. There are fight scenes in this movie, and you've got Van Damme who knows what he's doing, but the way the scenes are put together, it feels like every single movement in the fight was kind of taken on its own and filmed as a separate shot. To a certain extent, it felt kind of like the way modern movies are edited, where you just have all these random cuts and you can barely tell what's happening and it's supposed to look like a hectic fight. The difference was you could tell what was happening, and every shot held on for too long to where it felt like they said action and then they did a punch and then they said cut. And they left the whole thing in there. So every single shot, even though there's a lot of quick shots because it's just one punch at a time, it feels like you can see where they're starting, you can see where they end, and that's the whole shot. And then it goes to the next shot, and it's the same thing. And it just keeps going like that through the whole fight. So it makes the fights feel really slow and awkward and disjointed, but in a way where you can tell everything that's happening. So it was really weird. And they would sometimes show the same shot, the same action in a shot twice from different angles, and maybe do it in slow motion at one point, but in a way that makes no sense at all and doesn't add anything to the scene. Oh man, it was really hard to watch at times because it was just making me so angry. And again, the acting was terrible, so that didn't help. So yeah, this is a really bad movie that I would not recommend to anyone. It was kind of boring too. Even fans of bad movies, you might get some enjoyment out of it, but I honestly thought it was mostly just boring.
They created me to retrieve data from a computer system here in the city.
I read a book called Audience-ology by Kevin Blank. I don't know how to say his last name. I don't know if it's Goetz. It's probably Goetz, but I don't know. Kevin was in charge of a company that handles focus groups for movies. And according to the book, he does most studio movies that are released in the United States. So he definitely has a lot of experience and had some really good stories in this book. I'm not going to go into any of them. Most of them were actually about movies that I've never seen because, again, you're mostly dealing with mainstream movies, and I don't like a lot of mainstream American movies. But he had some really good stories about different things. And my one issue with the book really was that it's very unfocused. It just feels like it feels like you're sitting down with him and just listening to him tell stories about things. And they're good stories, but they don't really coalesce into something that kind of makes a coherent whole. It's just a bunch of stories. So I would recommend it to anybody who finds that interesting. It did change my perspective a little bit about focus groups. I do think there are things you can learn from listening to other people talk about whatever you've made, whatever you've put together as an artist. As somebody who writes stories, it's very important to me to send them out for people to read and get back to me about things, because it's really hard as a creator to know whether certain things are coming across the way you intend. And with a movie, when you're spending that much time working on one thing, I'm sure it's really hard to kind of keep a proper perspective on everything and really be able to tell what's working and what's not at times. And there are definitely some times in the book that they talk about that completely changed people's reaction to movies, and I'm sure made movies work better, or in some cases might even have not been the right decision to make. But it's definitely an interesting read. I'm glad I read it, but at the same time, it's mostly just a bunch of amusing stories. And that just came out in 2021. I talked about Robert E. Howard earlier. I read a Robert E. Howard collection of stories called Marchers of Valhalla. This was a collection that mostly consisted of stories that were not published in his lifetime. Actually, I think only one of them was actually published while he was alive, and that was the story that I liked the least out of the whole book. Usually when you find a short story collection like this, they'll be themed around a certain thing, like they'll all be fantasy stories, or in his case, like boxing stories or Western stories or something like that. But in this case, it was just a collection of random stuff. So you had some horror stories, you had some fantasy stuff, you had some kind of just general weird kind of stories. The one that I liked the most by far was the title story, Marchers of Valhalla, which was the longest one. It was really, really cool. It was about basically a group of, I guess, kind of like Norsemen that are traveling across the world. It's a little bit ridiculous because Robert E. Howard was from Texas, and these characters somehow travel all the way to Texas, where they find this ancient kingdom inhabited by this ancient race that nobody's ever heard of. But it was really cool. It reminded me of in the Song of Ice and Fire stories, where Daenerys comes to, I can't remember exactly what was happening because it's been a while since I read those, but she comes to some kingdom that's behind like a wall, and they're kind of outside, and they're trying to get their way in. I definitely feel like George R.R. Martin was probably inspired by Robert E. Howard in terms of his approach to fantasy, because it feels very similar, where the kind of magical elements and monsters and stuff like that are mostly in the background, and when they come up, they feel more important, but you don't have, like, elves dancing around everywhere or wizards flying around. Basically, these people come to this kingdom that's this huge city with a big wall around it that they can't get into, and they keep trying to fight their way in, and eventually the people in the city say, you know what, we'll let you in, we'll give you everything you want if you agree to help defend us against this other invading people that keep coming every once in a while from the ocean. And they said, okay, we'll kind of help you out and see what happens. But there's a lot of tension between them there, because clearly, one of them is trying to also invade, and it was really good. There was a lot of, you never quite know who's going to do what, and if somebody's going to turn on somebody else, and then the other invaders come in, and there's all these fights and everything. And to me, it felt much more character focused, but in an emotional kind of way, where the main character is kind of in love with this girl that's there at this city that they've come to, but he doesn't understand really being in love with someone because he's basically a savage, barbarian, violent guy. And he ends up trying to find her in this city while all this other stuff is going on, and a lot of people die. The whole story comes to a very satisfying conclusion, and it was great. It was really, really good. Unfortunately, I don't think this story is in print anywhere right now. This is the only book that I've found that it's actually collected in. It was reprinted a few times, but this copy is from the 70s, so I don't think it's available anywhere. But if anybody can find it, definitely check it out. It was really, really cool. And I've been playing Red Faction on the PS2, which is a first-person shooter where you play as a miner on Mars who becomes involved in an uprising where basically the miners are being treated like crap. They're basically treated like slaves by the people in charge, and there ends up being this huge fight, and, you end up shooting everybody. It's definitely Total Recall inspired, but unfortunately it doesn't bring in any of the humor from Total Recall, which I feel like is kind of one of the things that makes it so good. It ends up feeling a lot like the first Half-Life, or like it wants to be the first Half-Life. It's definitely not as good, not even close, but it's similar in its approach where you don't have cutscenes. There is a cutscene at the very beginning, but everything else is just played through the game. You kind of pick things up through audio messages or just kind of seeing things around in the environment. Part of what I don't like about it is that it feels too samey, like you're just kind of playing through and there's no breaks anywhere. It's just one long thing. Half-Life did a better job of kind of breaking things up a little bit, I thought. And even then, some of the sequences in Half-Life are definitely too long. And part of the big selling point for this game was the environmental destructibility, which is really cool. If you have explosive weapons, you can blow holes out of walls, you can create tunnels, you can, break into a locked room by blowing the wall out. There are certain weapons that let you see through walls so you can tell where people are on the other side. There's some cool stuff that they do with that. Unfortunately, I would say the core combat gameplay is not that satisfying. The enemy AI is really dumb. There's not a lot of satisfaction to the actual shot impacts, I would say, when you shoot somebody. Sometimes it's hard to tell if you're even hitting somebody. And just general shooting could definitely be improved. But it is a fun game. I guess I would recommend it if anybody has a PS2 and you want to just play a fun first-person game, but it's not going to blow you away, I don't think. Again, the most fun thing is destroying the environment. I think I still have a long ways to go in it. Maybe it'll get better if the story gets more involved, but there's honestly not a whole lot to it beyond just being a first-person shooter. And that's everything I checked out this month. What have you been watching? Unless you have any comments.
I do not, other than you seem to read more actual books than I do. I watched Liar Liar from 1997.
Oh, jeez.
Which was the height of Jim Carrey's Jim Carrey-ness, I think. He was extremely popular during this era.
Yeah, I was there. I remember.
And this was a little after the straight ridiculousness of Ace Ventura and attempting to make him a ridiculous person, but with actual real-world problems. And
like not being able to lie. No, I know what you mean.
some emotional depth of, I'm going to lose my son and blah, blah, blah. So it's about a guy whose kid makes a wish that he can't lie for a day. And I'll equate it to something more current that's stupid like that. Say, some Adam Sandler movie where that seems like something that would happen.
Yeah.
But Jim Carrey is actually able to pull off some actual emotional content. Whereas I feel like if this movie was made today, it would just be a bunch of inappropriate sex jokes the whole time, despite being a family movie.
Is there a reason The Wish works, or is it just because it's a movie?
It's just because it's the movie.
I mean, to me, that would open up a lot of doors. Like, what if he wishes for something else the next time?
He does. I think he says it was a football.
Okay, see, I was thinking, like, if he could be president or something like that.
I'm pretty sure there's gotta be some kid's movie out there where a kid is the president.
I mean, there was that whole DC comic, Prez, P-R-E-Z.
I watched Valkyrie from 2008, which is a Tom Cruise movie based on real-life events during World War II about a plot to assassinate Hitler and take control of the country. I wasn't aware of that going in. I remember seeing ads for it back in the day, but I guess just from the visuals, I assumed it was some kind of fictional Inglourious Bastards type thing, which it was not. I was not aware of any of it before watching this movie, because, you see Tom Cruise wearing an eye patch.
Yeah, I could see how that could make it look like just some kind of dumb movie thing. I saw it in the theater with someone who told me that someone else had told him that there was some kind of twist ending to the movie, and they didn't want to give it away, but they were like, it's a really good twist. And then he watched the movie, and he was like, I have no idea what that person was talking about. Did they think that they were going to succeed? That that's how World War II ended? So, yeah, it was pretty funny.
I watched Flawless from 2007, which is a movie with Michael Caine and Demi Moore set in the 60s, where she is a manager at a diamond corporation, and Michael Caine is a janitor. And they plan to steal some diamonds, each for their own reasons. And when I saw that's the way the movie was going, I was thinking, it's going to be some Mission Impossible style heist movie or something. But it was not. The stealing of the diamonds was incidental to their actual motivations. It was better than I expected it to be, and I thought they both did a really nice job. And it has a Merovingian in it, which is always a plus, regardless of whatever movie it is.
Uh-huh. What made you decide to watch that in the first place?
That's a good question. I don't know. I can't say. I watched Debug from 2014, which is a science fiction movie about prisoners who serve out their sentence by hacking and restoring abandoned spaceships because they're in prison for hacking, and this is part of their sentence. And one ship, they encounter an AI that is psychotic and starts killing them, which is not an original premise. You and I have both seen our fair share of movies that sound exactly like this, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't super high budget, but I thought it handled itself better than a lot of other movies like it. When I say most of the actors were young, unknown people, you probably say, ugh.
Yeah.
But they weren't all terrible. Some of them, yes, were terrible, but not all of them. It was engaging enough for me to pay attention the whole time. Whereas a lot of movies like this, within the first 20 minutes, you go, I don't even care anymore. Some pretty cool effects in this one too. Practical, not CG. I watched Netherbeast Incorporated from 2007, which is supposed to be a comedy about vampires that operate out of a corporate office, but they're just trying to live their lives and do day-to-day stuff, which doesn't involve killing people. It involves just doing corporate work. It was a unique premise, but the movie was really, really boring. The pacing was very sluggish. The writing thought it was being really funny and clever, but it was not. And when they would take these jokes that went on for 5-10 minutes, I was falling asleep, which is too bad, because it had some funny people in it. I watched Archive 81 from 2022, which is a horror show about this guy who restores old analog media, and he's hired by this corporation to restore these tapes recovered after a fire in an apartment building. But as he watches more and more, he gets into some messed up shit.
Okay, I think I saw the trailer for this.
Someone at work recommended it to me, and after the first episode, I was like, alright, this could go the way of most of these shows. But I stuck with it, and I'm glad I did. Although the word f*** was used, I'd say, every other sentence. And not just when things got weird and people were like, what the f***? But in regular day-to-day conversations with people that had just met each other for the first time. I don't know about you, but I don't drop F-bombs in job interviews with someone decades older than me like it's not a big deal. And they don't drop them back. It left itself open for another season, and I would probably watch it. Although the risk you run with shows like that is they always feel like they have to go bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
Where if the core idea is really good, you don't necessarily have to go as big as possible. I watched Battleship from 2012, which I had never seen before. I remember when it came out, and people were saying, they're making a movie based on that board game? That seems dumb. But after watching it, I'm going to counter with this. This movie has nothing to do with the board game, and I'm not even sure why they went through the effort in gaining the rights to the name, because it easily could have been called anything else and not lost anything. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it, but somebody at work was trying to tell me how good it was. In a non-ironic way.
In a nutshell, there are aliens trying to wipe us out, and it turns out the way to beat them is by doing nothing, because their weakness is the sun. You know that thing that's in the sky most of the time?
Are you serious?
Yes. It was a great movie.
Oh, man. The sun.
Yeah, they show up on Earth and they say, all right, time to take you guys down. Oh, what is that? And we say, it's the sun. You weren't aware of that thing when you got here?
I'm going to assume that they have some kind of force field or something that keeps out a certain radiation, and they take that down and that kills the aliens.
It's even less than that. I'm pretty sure they just wear sunglasses. The one guy takes one of the helmets and he goes, man, I can barely see. It's so dark in this thing. And they go, must be the sun.
So how do they beat them? They just take their helmets off?
They take down their shields and they, just take off their sunglasses and they all go, Garr. It was like someone read War of the Worlds and said, yes, what if it was the sun?
That's exactly what I thought of.
They failed to research the fact that the sun is just one of trillions of stars. Where, light comes from. I watched Contagion from 2011, which is a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow, your favorite, and mine.
I mean, I hate her in real life, but I don't mind her as an actress.
You're just saying that because you like Iron Man. And the movie is about a virus that causes a pandemic and reflects recent events actually pretty well, especially from being from 2011. There's a bunch of false information going around, people just trying to profit. There's a bunch of scientists who are telling people what they should do, but the message keeps changing. I was actually pretty impressed by how closely it mirrored recent events.
So was it a good movie?
It held my attention just because of recent events. I don't know if I would have felt the same way if we hadn't just gone through something like that. I watched Nightmare on Elm Street from 2010, so that remake, which was not very good. And it did borrow some things from the original, certain shots and imagery, but it chose to recreate them in CGI, which is always a good move. It wasn't even a reimagining, it was basically just a copy-paste of a movie from 1984. So I watched the one from 1984, which I haven't seen in a long time. That has some really cool effects and imagery that were a lot better than I remembered.
I agree.
And while Freddy does make jokes and stuff, when was the movie where he got super goofy and only used jokes and shit? Was that probably the second one?
I think it was probably the third one. I don't think he was quite like that in the second one yet. From what I remember, the second one was a little weirder with like the body horror stuff with him coming out of the kid.
So after that, I watched Freddy vs. Jason from 2003, which is just as good as it sounds.
I have not seen that one.
It was definitely stupid, but surprisingly, it was not as stupid as some of the later movies in each of those franchises. Freddy has been forgotten, and Jason is in hell, because he went to hell in that movie, Jason Goes to Hell.
Which we covered on this channel.
Was that our first movie one?
Yeah, don't watch that video, it's not good.
Oh man, so awful. We ended up talking about stuff that wasn't even related, like sex shops and My Little Pony, right?
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So Jason is in hell, and Freddy needs to be remembered, so he tricks Jason into starting to kill people.
Wait, how does he get him out of hell?
Just pulls him up.
Okay.
I don't actually remember. So Freddy masquerades as Jason's mom and tells him he needs to go kill a bunch of people in that town. I can't remember the name of the town. Wherever Elm Street is. And so he does, and then all of the parents who have hidden Freddy's existence so he won't be remembered start to suspect it's him and do a great job of continuing to keep him hidden by going, "Do you think it's Freddy?" And then someone goes, "Don't talk about Freddy." And the kids go, "Who's Freddy?" And they go, "Shit! We kept saying the name Freddy!" And they're like, "Freddy who?" And they're like, "Freddy Krueger." I mean, oh, damn it! It is that comedic, but they play it serious. I wish they had kind of done it in a more comedic sense. So then Freddy is able to come back, but Jason is on a killing spree, and Freddy's like, "Stop killing them. Like, that's my job. You're done." And then they end up fighting each other. I watched a 2017 movie called Going in Style, which is a remake of a George Burns movie from 1979, where three old dudes decide to rob a bank. And this time, it's Alan Arkin, Michael Caine, and Morgan Freeman, which is a weird combination.
You and your Michael Caine obsession.
Maybe that's why that other one popped up. Algorithms at work. But since this one is 2017, their motivations are more relatable to the current time. Like one of them's going to lose their house, that kind of stuff, because the bank is being a dick. I think my parents would like this one a lot more than I did. It definitely seemed like a movie that would be more relatable to an older demographic, and the jokes they were making, it seemed like a perfect old person ending, where they divvy up all these millions of dollars to people just out in the open, and all this nice music plays, and you supposedly walk out of the theater going, "Oh, that was so nice." "Oh, it's past 6 o'clock. We can't get the early bird anymore." I watched The Green Mile from 1999, which was Frank Darabont's second time in a Stephen King period piece set in a prison. And I felt like he uses this one to not only tell the story, but stick in a bunch of stuff that he may have wanted to do or realized that he could have done in The Shawshank Redemption. I mean, this sucker's 3 hours long. Have you seen it?
I have not.
It's good, but it's not something I could just pick up and watch like I could with The Shawshank Redemption. It definitely drags at times. It feels a little bloated. You definitely have to be in the right mood and willing to commit to those 3 hours.
I also have not read the book. Have you read the book?
I have. I've seen the movie more than I've read the book. The book was originally, I believe, published...
serially.
Yeah. The movie is Tom Hanks is...
The Green Mile.
Tom Hanks works at a prison on death row, and this one big dude played by Michael Clark Duncan comes in, and he ends up having supernatural powers. So imagine The Shawshank Redemption, but there's some magic happening. I watched Frankenstein from 2014.
Oh, jeez.
Now, see, I didn't know what this movie was.
Isn't that one based on a comic?
I don't know. Is it?
I think so. Is that the one with, there's like a battle between heaven and hell or whatever?
That's all of them. That's life, Robert. Turned out to be dumber than I thought. So Frankenstein's monster, after the events of Frankenstein, ends up teaming up with gargoyles, led by Eowyn, in a crusade against demons, led by Bill Nighy.
Who's Eowyn? Is that a Lord of the Rings reference or something?
Yeah, that's the only other thing I knew her from.
Who is that? Liv Tyler or whatever? Is that her character?
That's Arwen. You're embarrassing yourself, dude.
I don't freaking know. I don't know Lord of the Rings, and I don't care. I know Snarf was the dragon or whatever, and that's about it.
And Bill Nighy and his demons are trying to use Frankenstein's methods to resurrect demons that have been killed. I thought Van Helsing was a product of its time, and we wouldn't have anything like that again. But this was 10 years later, and it popped up. So I'm looking forward to 2024 when we get some sort of werewolf, Invisible Man crossover thing.
I saw part of that movie when I worked at a movie theater, and it looked like the dumbest thing I had ever seen, so I'll probably check it out at some point.
It completely redeemed itself because the last line of the movie, he goes, "I, Frankenstein." Then the credits go, poof.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so if you've ever wanted to see a movie where Frankenstein's monster is highly sexualized, this is the movie for you. I watched Sucker Punch from 2011, which I also had never seen. I saw pictures and I said, I don't want to watch that. So this month I watched it. It's Zack Snyder's first original movie, I think.
Yeah.
And the studio let him do it due to the success of Watchmen. It is a complete mess. Outside of the criticisms of its depiction of women and sex and whatever, it's just a poorly written mess. It's just not a good movie. I am much more inclined to dissect the intricacies and messages and symbolism of a film if it's not a piece of shit. Like, when Christopher Nolan was told he could do Inception if he did The Dark Knight, he said, okay. And then Inception turned out to be awesome. And not just because of an idea, but because the movie was good. He made a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
Sucker Punch was not. It was an idea that Zack Snyder had, but that was it. But then he still made the movie anyway. It feels like it thinks it's very clever, but it's the opposite of those things, whatever that would be.
So it's a typical Zack Snyder movie.
Yeah. And the sequel is going to be Batman vs. Superman vs. Sucker Punch. So it's this girl who's in a mental asylum, and she's put there against her will, and a lot of the movie takes place in her head, and there's these big Zack Snyder-y action scenes set in different time periods, and freaking Scott Glenn's in it.
That's weird.
Do not waste your time.
Is it good visually, at least? Because I usually do like the cinematography and visuals in Zack Snyder movies. I guess it depends. Not when he does those big CGI things where the camera sweeps across like a battlefield. Or his dumb slow motion stuff.
Man, you're describing the whole movie right now. Even the color palette. It's Zack Snyder completely unfiltered. Because he's saying, I'm making this one based on my own ideas. Somebody at work was really, really talking up Better Call Saul. I have not seen it. I haven't seen Breaking Bad either. But I decided to try Better Call Saul. And I got through season 1. And I am definitely going to continue. I asked, am I going to be in the dark, having not seen Breaking Bad? And they said no.
Does it take place before Breaking Bad then? Or what?
Yes, it's a prequel to Breaking Bad. Bob Odenkirk plays a lawyer, Jimmy McGill, who is trying his best, but his life situation and the choices he's made make things more difficult. There's some humor in it, good humor, not stupid humor, and some actual conflict that makes sense. And it ties into Breaking Bad, I assume, with all the drugs and stuff and those characters. So I don't get the big nostalgia high when a certain character shows up. Like, I'm supposed to know who they are. But they contribute to this show as well. So it's not like they're just there.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest surprise for me was Michael McKean, because I'm so used to seeing him in goofy, Tim Burton-esque comedies and roles like that. You know what I mean?
Is he the guy from those X-Files episodes? Is that who I'm thinking of?
Yes. So he plays Bob Odenkirk's brother, and he has this psychological condition where he can't go outside because of electronic devices. So his whole house is lit by lanterns and stuff like that. But he plays it really well in not a goofy way. I was really impressed with his acting and everything. So I'm going to keep going with that. I watched the Rocky Horror Picture Show from 1975, which I've seen plenty of times. The first time I saw it was way back when VHS tapes were on their way out. So every store that sold records and movies and whatever was trying to offload all of their tapes. So they would be marked down to like a quarter, 50 cents, $1. So you could walk in with $20 and walk out with 25 movies. It was a really nice time. And I kept my VCR for way longer than I probably should have. And I saw this movie and I said, yeah, I'm up for a horror movie because I didn't know anything about it. And then I was reading the back and I was like, oh, Tim Curry's in this. That's cool. I like Tim Curry. And then I watched it and I said, oh, this just keeps getting weirder and weirder. And this time I was watching the Blu-ray, which has a lot of commentary, which was okay. And, you know, a bunch of special features that I don't particularly care about. It feels like a movie that's being made by people who don't have a ton of experience making movies. But the style of everything helps it succeed. I mean, Tim Curry is awesome. He's the only reason Home Alone 2... I don't know how to finish that sentence. He's the best part of Home Alone 2.
I had somebody at work trying to argue that Home Alone is a Christmas classic.
Yep, people say that.
I mean, granted, I haven't seen it. I can't imagine that I would refer to it as a Christmas classic.
I think a lot of people do. My favorite Christmas movie is probably Gremlins.
I need to go back and watch the first one again, because I did like the second one a lot, and I was really surprised, because I remember not liking the first one at all.
First one is always more violent than I remember. I read The Essential Defenders Volume 4, which is the transition from the 70s to the 80s. Unfortunately, it was not as trippy as Volumes 2 and 3, despite them going to Tunnel World and meeting characters called Zuckavunk. There's a lot of variety in this one, though. Like, they go to Asgard, go to Tunnel World. Something I really did not like was a huge recurring plot element was Kyle Richmond, Nighthawk, and his fight against the IRS. For one or two issues, okay, but it was pretty much the entire volume. And he turned into a complete dick. Doctor Strange left. He was put in charge of the Defenders. And it was funny at the beginning because this dude named Dollar Bill was making a documentary about them and released it without their knowledge. And at the end said, if you want to be a Defender, come on down. So all of these heroes come to Richmond's ranch and they say, we're going to be Defenders. What's up? That was pretty funny. Including a bunch of villains who just started being villainous and saying, we're the Defenders. Yeah, Kyle Richmond was a dick. He just yelled at everybody and said everything was unfair. Just cried like a baby the whole time. It wasn't interesting. And it didn't have a good resolution either.
Is that still before, like, Iceman and the Beast and Angel?
Yeah. There's the dude called Lunatic, who speaks in period-appropriate slang for the late 70s, which was pretty annoying.
Who's the writer on these?
Seeing a lot of Ed Hannigan. It wasn't very good. I wasn't as entertained as I was with the past two volumes. The Hulk buys a lot of beans. I remember that part. Valkyrie goes shopping and she says, man, there's so many things to choose from. I don't even know what everyone wants. And Hulk goes, Hulk knows what to get. Beans. Lots of beans. And it's funny because for the next couple of issues, they all just eat beans instead of just going out and buying new food. It ended with the Mandrill. I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
And Daredevil shows up because I guess he's a Daredevil villain.
I think he's just one of those guys that kind of pops up all over the place.
And the Mandrill can...
hypnotize women, right? He can mind control them.
Yeah, maybe some pheromones or something.
I can't remember.
But women have to do what he wants. So Hellcat and Valkyrie have to do what he wants. And typical comic book fashion, the way to shock them out of it is to literally shock them out of it with giant volts of electricity. I read The Infinity Gauntlet from 1991, written by Jim Starlin. Pretty sure it's 1991. Because, you know, all these Avengers movies and people saying, man, where did they ever come up with that? And I say it happened like decades ago. So I'm not too familiar with before this, but at the beginning, Thanos has the Infinity Gauntlet with all the gems. Was there a build up to him doing that, or did he just have it at the start of this one?
I think it probably happened in the Silver Surfer, but I don't know. That's not a period of comics that I'm that familiar with.
Well, Thanos has the Infinity Gauntlet with all the gems, you know, space, time, meat, vegetables, whatever they are. And he's going to take over. So Adam Warlock shows up and says, we can stop this. I got a plan involving Earth's mightiest heroes and a bunch of celestial beings. Which, as a kid, I was always totally on board with all the celestial stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I had some Adam Warlock comic as a kid, and he went to talk to them, and I was like, these are the coolest characters ever. I don't know anything about them, but there's a dude with 3 faces. There's a guy who looks like space.
Yeah, that's probably the Living Tribunal in Eternity.
Yeah. So Adam Warlock has to stop Thanos, and he does. So you don't need to read it now. It was funny, though, how every issue built up to the next one of it being the biggest thing ever, and then it would happen, and then it'd say, but there's something even bigger happening now. I wish I had read more Silver Surfer. I mean, there's no reason I can't now. It was always a character that interested me that I didn't really know too much about.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Like all his stuff with Galactus and everything. Being his, crony? That's what he calls it, right? You are the crony of Galactus now.
Yeah.
And that was followed by Infinity War, right?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them.
Was that directly after it, or was that later?
According to Wikipedia, followed by 2 immediate sequels, The Infinity War in 1992 and The Infinity Crusade in 93.
I played a game from 2018 called The Colonists, which is a world-building game. It was kind of unique to me, at least I've never played a game like it, where you build a structure, and every structure requires resources to make, and it produces a resource that is used to make another structure. So the only naturally occurring thing to start with is wood, which is just from trees. And when you make a structure, it automatically starts outputting whatever it outputs, as long as it has the correct inputs. And when another structure needs it, you don't have to tell it to send it to that. There's all these tiny little robots that automatically take anything exactly where it needs to go. I like that element of it, that automation, but the challenge comes in determining what to make, when to make it, and how to set up paths for these robots so everything is as effective as possible. I initially just tried it out, but ended up losing pretty much an entire weekend. It was a port. I imagine it would be a lot more fluid on a PC, and I really wanted a keyboard and a mouse. And it was not a great port either. It felt like there were some things that just were broken, and I hope they weren't actually broken in the original release. But it was good. I really liked it. And I played a game called Pressure Overdrive from 2017, which I guess is an overhaul of a game just called Pressure. And it's a combination of a shmup with RPG elements and kind of racing, I guess. I thought the way it was put together was pretty effective. It was not difficult, it was a little repetitive, but the idea was there and the concept was well executed. So that's March. Hopefully this will be published before March of 2023. So thanks for watching to the end if you did so.
Yeah, it's good to know we're not just wasting our time, but other people's time too.